Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Printed. I'm your host, Vanessa Gomez, and we're back with our department series. This time, we're going to talk about a new department for us, the rights department, also combined with sales. As always, we're going to be talking with our guest about her experience in the industry and a specific career advice for people who are just getting started. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and follow the podcast. We have some amazing guests lined up for you for this season that you do not want to miss. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Today, we have an amazing guest with us. She studied English literature at McMaster University, holds a master's degree in Canadian literature from the University of Ottawa, and completed the publishing program at Humber College in 2015. After her time as an intern at ECW Press, she landed a full time job and rose through ranks, eventually landing in her current position as the sales and rights director at ECW Press. Please, everyone, welcome Emily Ferko to Printed. Hi, Emily, how are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great.
Of course, are you ready to get started?
I am.
Okay, perfect. Well, to get started and to warm things up, I always like to start with a section that is called the What Are You section. So, Emily, what are you reading, watching, listening? It doesn't have to be with books, but anything that you're enjoying at the moment.
Okay, well, this one's very easy because I just started on the weekend binging The Pit. So I'm loving that. I did not think I would be into it because I don't typically like blood, but it's amazing. And what am I reading? I am going back through Kate Atkinson's backlist. I'm a big Kate Atkinson fan, so I'm reading the Jackson Brody series again. So I'm on book two and enjoying my time with Jackson.
Oh, that's great. And is there anything that you're listening at the moment, music or anything?
Oh, Hillary Duff's new album, of course. As a
Oh,
millennial, it's
mhm.
part of the contract you sign.
Very nice, very nice. Well, from my part, I'm finishing up reading Wild Reverence from Rebecca Ross, which is a YA book. I'm really liking it. What I'm currently listening to, I would say I'm still listening to Olivia Dean, which is like a new Grammy artist. So I'm just listening to her album, going through it, loving it. And then what I'm watching, I am watching the JFK Jr. series that just dropped on Netflix. So it's just like his story with like Caroline Bessette, which was his wife, and then how like both of their lives tragically ended. But it's kind of like the story of how they met and like everything that happened between that. So yeah, that's what I'm watching at the moment. So let's get started. I want to get started kind of with something simple and talking about the departments that you work for. You're the sales and rights director, as we said at the beginning. So for people that are not in publishing or maybe are just getting started, what do those departments do? What do you take care of? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, for sure. So sales and rights, it's always going to be a little bit different at every house that you're at, especially if you're looking at an indie press versus a multinational press. But I would essentially explain the sales and rights department as the team that is connecting a book to its readers. So thinking about who the audience is, figuring out where that audience lives, the best ways for that audience to actually find and access a book, and then making sure that it's available in those areas. So um, there's lots of different ways that we do this. It kind of starts at development. We work closely with editorial and with marketing and with publicity, but our main job is just position the book in the marketplace, make sure it's available, discoverable, where people are looking for it, and then help it reach as many people as possible.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. And that sounds kind of like one of the main things that kind of puts the book out there and like into the hands of consumers. Um, and when in the kind of publishing process does the team get involved? I know that sometimes, editorial gets involved from the very beginning. Design sometimes also gets involved from the very beginning. Where does that land with sales and with rights?
Yeah, so I'll start with sales. Sales is involved a lot earlier than people may think.
Mm-hmm.
At ECW, we essentially are starting working on a book immediately after it's acquired. So an
Okay.
editor has read it, they've decided it's a great fit for the press, they acquire it, they sign a contract, and I'm immediately involved. Sometimes even before, I'll be talking with editors about things
Mhm.
that they're thinking about. But for the purpose of this, we'll say right at acquisition, I'm kind of thinking about, where will this book sell? Is it mainly a library book? Is it a book where people are more so going to be finding it online, like on Amazon or something like that? That I'm kind of thinking about, how much lead time are we going to need for this book? So, should we publish it in a year from now, or should we think about waiting 18 months? Fiction typically needs a little bit longer, just to kind of build that runway for promotion. So that's something that sales would kind of consult on when the book is first acquired. And then also, we're immediately thinking about, categories. So what BISACs the book should be placed in, so that, where is it going to show up in the bookstore or on those Amazon categories. All of those like fun metadata and keywords, things that make the book discoverable. And then we're looking at packaging, trim, the format. All these things can kind of signal who the audience is and what the price point should be. So we're kind of working with editorial and production, but we're using market context. We're using past performance of books in this area to kind of guide our way. And it's all starting really early, because every decision that you make ultimately is going to shape how the book lands in the world. So we want to make sure that we're on it, like right from the start. And then I don't know if you kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how that kind of changes as the book moves through the process.
Absolutely, yeah. Any information that you can give us, it would be
Yeah,
great. Yeah.
yeah. So, let's say we acquired a book today,
Mm-hmm.
February, and I'm involved in making those decisions, and we come up
Mm-hmm.
with, the book's going to come out 1 year from now.
Mm-hmm.
As we're kind of approaching that February 2027, the role of sales kind of changes from developing what that package looks like, and instead we're looking at selling the title to stores. So a lot of indie presses will use rep agencies. They're commissioned rep agencies. They are the ones who are actually selling the book to an Indigo buyer or to an independent bookstore buyer or a library buyer. So I don't have to worry about that. Our reps are amazing. We work with Manda, the Canadian Manda group, but there are others in Canada as well. If you work at a multinational, they most likely have their own sales teams that are doing that selling. But what I do is that I'm providing our reps with all the information that they need to do that selling. So, you can't just say, well, here's a catalog, go nuts. You kind of want to explain what the book is, who the market for the book is, and make sure that you're giving them kind of as much information as possible, so that when they're sitting in front of an Indigo buyer and they're pitching 300 books, they have, that 15-second pitch that really highlights what is going to make this book stand out for that account. And that's kind of, our job at the press, is to make sure that they have that information. So that's probably happening, about 6 months before the book comes out. And then as we get closer and closer, we're kind of moving more from that development and that explanation of what the book is and selling it to just more logistics. The logistics side of like, is the book shipped? Is it in our warehouse? How many orders do we have? Have all the orders that we expect come in? If they haven't, why not? Let's follow up on that. And making sure that like there are no barriers to getting those books out the door, making sure there are no barriers to people ordering those books. So making sure they're showing up on Amazon and on Indigo and all those fun places. And yeah, once the book is out, that's, that's kind of where the focus lies, and like making sure that all the work that we've done is now paying off. Rights is a little bit different. Rights tends to kind of start at the 6 month before publication mark, where we might start pitching the book for audiobook licensing. Translation pitching might happen more when the book has been published, because you kind of have reviews and you have things to kind of use to show that the book is being well received in the world. So, the timelines on sales and rights are a little bit different, but, they're all kind of working to the same goal.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, no, that's a great explanation for someone that doesn't know how those departments work. And I kind of want to get back to something that you mentioned because I know it makes sense to me, but maybe not to someone that is not in the industry or has never heard these terms. But can you
Sure.
explain to us what exactly the lead time means and what it's a catalog?
Yeah, for sure. So lead time to me is just like how much time between acquiring the book and publishing the book.
Okay.
So, when I say that fiction needs more lead time,
Mhm.
what I mean by that is that we want to have more time to kind of build reader buzz and to maybe solicit reviews from online platforms like NetGalley, where
Mhm.
people, influencers and reviewers and librarians and booksellers can apply to get an early copy of the book in exchange for leaving a review. It also can be that we like are pitching it at different conferences to kind of like build that buzz. And the reason why fiction needs longer is just it's harder to sell. There's not that built-in hook that a nonfiction might have something really timely with a nonfiction book that it's connected to an election or something that's happening in the news. So that's just why fiction needs a longer lead time. And what's a catalog? I can show you one. I should have had one. So here's a couple of years ago, but we put out a catalog every season, and it's literally just a booklet of all the books coming out within that time period. So at ECW, we have a spring season, a summer season, and a fall season. And the catalog has, like the copy. So essentially what you would see on the back of the book, but an earlier version of it. And then we have the author bio. So talking about, what makes this person the right person to write this book. And then we have something called key sales notes. And what that is that's kind of explaining to our sales reps why this book is interesting or why this book is saleable. So you might say something like the author has 2 million Instagram followers in your key sales notes. Or you might say, this book is about this band, and this band is about to go out on this massive world tour that's going to make it really relevant when the book comes out.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great. Thank you so much for explaining that to
Yeah.
us. And now I kind of want to go back sometimes like to the beginning, like when a book is acquired.
Hmm.
We know that of course like editorial has an opinion about it, but we also know that all the other departments also chime in. So when it comes to sales and rights, how much influence does the department have on when a book is acquired or not? And I know that that changes from house to house. So what's your perspective from the house that you're working at right now?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It changes from house to house. And at ECW, we're very much an editor driven press. So it's something that I think makes ECW really unique is that if an editor really believes in a project, they have autonomy to acquire it. That said, that doesn't mean that they're just ignoring the opinions of every department. I think our editors are really aware of the market and the fact that like we can't just publish books that don't have a market. And they want their books to be successful. Of course, we all do. So that's kind of where sales comes in. I attend editorial meetings every week, and I may be giving feedback on an acquisition. So an editor is thinking about acquiring a book. I might be asking questions like, well, who's the audience for this? Where do we think it would realistically sell? Are there challenges in the market that we need to think about? Or are there opportunities that we haven't thought about? Is there a really strong regional market that we could consider, and that would putting that into the P&L will really help make those numbers work for that acquisition. A P&L, I'm going to explain, as I can almost hear you say, hey, if people don't know, a P&L is a profit and loss statement. And essentially what it is something an acquiring editor would create in Excel, or I guess any program you want, where they're putting in kind of what it would cost to make the book and then the projected revenue on that book. So whether or not you're actually going to make money or lose money or break even. And that's something that, most acquirers will do for any title that they're looking to take on. Um, so talking about a P&L statement, one thing that might be really interesting is if, I have an editor in the editorial meeting who's saying, I really want to acquire this book about stand-up paddleboarding, but I think it's a great book. I think the author's the right one to write it. It's really interesting, but like, is the market there? I can then share It's crazy. I was talking with an audiobook publisher 3 months ago, and they said that they're really looking for swimming sport books. And being able to share that information, while it's not a guarantee, is allowing that editor to kind of see, oh, I see there's a market in that audiobook space for this. If we got an audiobook deal that adds X amount of dollars to my P&L, maybe that's the kind of balancing of whether or not this book can actually be acquired. So I provide input. I might provide input on, like, if you're acquiring this, I think you should publish it in October because of, that means that we can really hit it hard at the conference that comes right before then, or, tie it to this media event. So, I'm giving input. I'm not necessarily yes or no. I'm more so giving input and feedback on what I think based on my experience in the market, and then that editor makes the final call and is ultimately responsible for how that book does.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense. And now that I hear you talking about like audiobooks and like selling rights to audiobooks, I want to get into something that not many people know about, and like that's sub rights to a book.
Yes.
So what are those exactly, and how does like selling sub rights to a book work?
Yeah, totally. I didn't know what subrights were till like 3 years into working at this job. So, subrights are basically all of the different ways a book can live in the world that isn't its physical body. So that can mean audiobooks, like I've said, that can mean translating into a different language, that can mean licensing English language rights into another country and they do their own edition, or it can mean selling film rights. So we see lots of books turned into film, that's a subright. So basically any type of taking that into intellectual property and turning it into something else is a subright. Subrights are super important. Also, something I didn't realize until later in my publishing career. Physical book sales are difficult, and it can be hard to make a profit based on physical book sales alone. So, subrights allow for a diversified way of making revenue. It creates additional income streams, and it can make a book profitable. So, if we have this book, if we continue with our paddleboarding book, if we sell audiobook rights to that book, that means that we're getting an advance from an audiobook publisher, and that's revenue in our pocket, and we didn't have to spend money to make that audiobook. The audiobook publisher is now making that product and selling that product. We're making a royalty on it, and that's contributing to the bottom line of that book. So this is kind of like reducing risk in an industry where the margins really really thin, and it allows that if the physical books sales do underperform, that we can still make that book successful.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah. That's a great way to explain it. And I think now with this kind of overview of the sales department and the rights department, I kind of want to shift gears a little bit
Sure.
and talk about kind of like some things that maybe will be helpful to the people starting out in the industry. So my first question for this section is, from your experience and what you've lived through and how you got to your position, do people need kind of like a formal education like in business, or maybe in contracts? I've heard people say like, oh, do I need to be a lawyer to work in rates, or can they like bring like transferable skills from other industries as well?
Yeah, I do not think you need formal background. I don't think you need to have your MBA. I don't think you need to be a lawyer. I think all of the skills. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't do a business degree. All of the skills that um, I've learned on the job, and I've learned by bringing in from other experiences. So you kind of mentioned it in my bio, but my path to publishing was super meandering. I did an English degree like so many of us do, and then you're like, I guess I'm going to be a teacher, because no one seems to tell us what else we could do with this degree. I went back and I did my master's thinking that I would maybe get involved in academia and do my PhD, but decided it wasn't for me. And then I was, working in administration at a trucking company company. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I've always loved books, and I had worked part-time at Indigo stores, kind of on and off for the last 10 years at that point. And I had never heard of publishing school before. And I just happened to have someone mentioned to me that they were thinking of going to publishing school, and I thought, oh, that's interesting, and I looked into it. So yeah, like I had no formal experience whatsoever beyond working part-time at a bookstore. I did the publishing program, and I actually took the operations internship at ECW, which was not at all the internship I wanted. I was like horrified by the idea of operations, the idea of business, the idea of finances, but I knew that I needed to understand how publishing worked, and that this was kind of the best way to do it. You know, you get a really general overview at publishing school, but I needed to be able to see kind of how all the pieces were going to work together. And I thought, I guess I'll do it this way. And so I took that internship, and it honestly was the best thing I could have done for my career, because it allowed me to kind of understand how grants work in Canadian publishing, and how the financials work, and how all of the different accounts kind of play different roles of different importances, how subrights, contribute to the bottom line. And working in this area that I thought, oh, I'm not interested in, it was really interesting. And I learned that I really liked doing stuff like inventory analysis. So, that enthusiasm and curiosity is really important. And I would say that, more important than bringing any kind of credential would just be highlighting in your interview or on your resume, your cover letter, your ability to problem solve, your ability to adapt, and also an engagement with the publishing industry, the Canadian publishing industry. And this ability to show that you care about the industry, I think, is really important. If you get involved in something in the industry, you can meet different people, understand how their jobs fit into the big picture, and people are super helpful in Canadian publishing. Um, yeah, and I think like that type of relationship building and that like customer service skills, it all kind of comes into play, especially in sales and rights. Like relationship building is so important, and customer service skills are so important, that that's going to serve you way more than a business degree or a paralegal, a certificate, or whatever the case may be.
Yes. Oh, I love your kind of like explanation on how you got to the industry, because it actually answered my next question, which was like, from your experience, which like parts of your journey do you think like contributed to like landing in the career that you're right now? So that was perfect. Thank you so much for
Okay, great.
explaining that. And now I kind of want to get into something that I also like started learning about when I started researching the industry. And I think for people that are going to go specifically into sales might be important. So I want to put the question out there for people that are going to like apply to sales roles, or are going to be candidates. How important do you think is that they get familiar with what sales channels are, and the sales channels specifically in Canada?
That's a really good question. You will, if you're in publishing school, you're going to get a general outline.
Hmm.
That's a great starting point. It's probably not nearly as much as, you're going to need in your day to day. So the nitty gritty of how the sales channels actually work, you're always going to learn that on the job. What channels are important is all going to depend on what press you end up working for. It's not even an indie multinational thing. It's like from press to press, depending on the types of books they publish, a library account may be more important than a bookstore, like a chain bookstore account. So I think just being generally aware that like we have one major chain in this country, and it's Indigo. A lot of people go to buy books on Amazon, knowing that independent bookstores are making a huge resurgence in the market, especially post COVID, and kind of knowing maybe some of the big independent players. We've got McNally Robinson out in Winnipeg. That's like a really great example of a big player in the indie space. Knowing that libraries buy books, just having that knowledge is great, and that they're probably buying from a wholesaler, a library wholesaler. Understanding that Not a ton of books are getting sold in places like Walmart or Shoppers Drug Mart or airports. Costco actually doesn't even really sell books anymore. So understanding that those places probably aren't going to come into the picture if you, especially if you work in an independent. All the other pieces, what channels matter, why they matter, that's going to come when you're on the job. So just having that kind of like bigger picture of what accounts exist, that there is going to be some importance, and that that importance is really going to depend on the book that you're working on. The rest is going to come with experience.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. And now that we are kind of like talking into like the sales and we're in the sales team, I wanted to ask, I've seen like a lot of sales is also like working with spreadsheets, working with reporting. So how comfortable does one need if one wants to go into sales with like spreadsheets or like reporting or data analysis? Is that something that you use in your everyday?
You don't have to be a wizard, a spreadsheet
Okay, good.
wizard, which is nice. Being comfortable with Excel is a benefit, I think, in a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
Being comfortable with basic numbers, basic data, that's great. I am absolutely not great at Excel, but I have problem solving skills and I have Google. So
Hmm.
I can kind of get through most things. I learned pivot tables in publishing school. Pivot tables are my best friend. Other
Hmm.
than that, I think knowing how to work with a basic spreadsheet and knowing kind of what you're looking for and what asking questions of data is more important than figuring out how to move that data around or make it do what you want it to do. You can get that from Google. We have so many kind of tools at our disposal, but what Google can't give you is the questions that you need to ask. So, why is this sales trend tracking this way? Is the question that Google can't ask. But what Google can answer is like, take this set of data and help me put it into a chart that shows me X. So, asking smart questions about your data, being able to kind of spot trends, that's all way more important than the actual Excel spreadsheet stuff. You can learn that. And it'll depend on what, your role is as well. I don't use a ton of it, but my boss, David Kieran, who's the publisher at ECW, he does a ton more spreadsheet work than I do. So it really does depend.
Okay, good. I think it's going to be good for people who want to gain sales to know that you don't have to be a spreadsheet wizard or
Yeah.
have like tons of experience in data analysis. Like you can just learn on the job. And I think everyone right now is kind of comfortable with Excel. So like in any job that you have, even administrative, try to like play around with Excel. And I think that's what you will
Absolutely.
need. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And to kind of end this section, I kind of always ask this question because I've heard it for like so many people in so many different departments that when you say to your friends or to your family that you work into publishing, there are so many misconceptions that people like assume about working into publishing. So my question is, you work in sales, you work in rights. What are kind of like the misconceptions that you hear around about working in those departments?
I think that a big misconception is that books are going to sell hundreds of thousands of copies,
Hmm.
and that the measures of success are that you've hit the New York Times bestseller list, that you've printed 3 million copies, and I think that success looks really different in Canadian publishing, specifically in independent Canadian publishing. So I guess the misconception would just be like, it's about reaching the right readers, not all readers. That having a really engaged audience, and finding the people who will read your book and review your book and tell other people about the book is really meaningful, and that can be a measure of success. That's not the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, now I kind of want to have like a fun break because I've been asking you a lot of questions and you've
Sure.
shared a lot of knowledge with us. So, this is our literary rapid fire quiz. You
Mm,
can answer as quickly as you want and you don't have
okay.
to overthink. So the first one is, what's your favorite book genre?
Ooh, literary fiction, but if it has like a family, multi generational situation happening.
Oh, nice. Okay. Do you have a go-to author or a favorite author that you like reading?
I love Kate Atkinson. I love Ann Patchett. Oh, I think that's it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that works. What's kind of your preferred book format? Hardcover, paperback, ebook, audiobook?
I'm an ebook girl. I love my Kobo. I
Mm.
could read in bed and it's so light, and I can turn the light off and it has a so my husband can sleep and it has a light in it and I can take it in the bath.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Do you like to buy or borrow books more?
Oh, I like to borrow.
Yeah.
I work in
Mhm.
publishing. I should be buying books, but I love my Overdrive account.
Hey, I totally get it because I have my Libby account and I have like 100 holds on my Libby account, so I
Yeah.
totally get it. What's one book that you wish you could read again for the first time?
Oh, that's such a good question. Oh my goodness. Um, this is gonna be so basic, but
That's okay. That's okay.
I really feel like Gone Girl is what got me into
Oh,
loving
mm-hmm.
books.
Yeah.
Not loving books, but like brought me back to books. And the twist in that book just
Mm-hmm.
now it's so mundane and cliche because everything that came after it had really
Right.
took that. But
Mm-hmm.
oh, I loved the experience of reading that book for the first time.
Yeah, no, that book was so good. I don't think that's basic. I think that's a good answer. Do you have a prefer reading beverage, tea, coffee,
Ooh,
wine?
no, I just
Just
water,
water.
I guess.
Water. Okay. Perfect. Do you feel like you're a morning reader or a night reader?
Night,
Okay.
definitely.
Do you consider yourself a fast or a slow reader?
I am a fast reader to my detriment. I tend to skim.
Hmm.
So this year, one of my goals is to slow down. I don't need to read as much as long as I can ingest the information and remember it.
Okay, yes, I totally get it. I'm also one of the readers that skims and then it's like, oh, I don't remember that part happened. It's because I
Yeah, like I
skipped
missed
half a
that.
half a
Yeah.
page. Yes, totally. And the last one is that if you could recommend one book to everyone listening, what would that be?
Oh, I guess I should recommend an ECW book. I would recommend The Witch of Willow Sound by
Okay.
Vanessa Penny.
Hmm.
It came out in October of 2025,
Okay.
and it is I would call it like a cozy gothic. It's set in Nova
Oh.
Scotia. It's got a lot of atmosphere, and it's about a young woman. She's in her 20s and she's looking for her missing aunt that the whole town thinks
Mm.
is a witch. So there's like some otherworldly stuff going
Hmm.
on. Is it supernatural? Is it not? And you've got those just like fabulous gothic vibes.
Oh, I love that. Okay, you survived our little rapid fire quiz. You're good. So now we kind of want to get into the Q&A for the community. We only have
Sure.
4 questions.
Okay.
So the first thing that they ask is how do you kind of forecast sales from a debut author versus an already established one?
Okay, so forecasting for an established author is a lot easier because you have past data to work with. I would say for an established author or an established genre, at ECW we publish a lot of wrestling books, so it doesn't necessarily matter who the author is. If it's a wrestling book, I can say, okay, what did our last wrestling books look like? If it's like a niche genre like that, so I can kind of look, if it's a book that we've published, we have all that internal data of like where the book sold and how many, how long it took, so like over what period of time. That really helps us make a really good educated guess for like the first 12 to 24 months of sales. Even then though, it's like you always have to be thinking like, what if we get this number wrong? So for example, if we're looking at quotes for 5,000 copies, and it turns out that we actually needed closer to 6,000. We have to be thinking about, okay, if we pick 5,000 and it needed to be 6, how difficult and costly is that 1,000 copy reprint going to be? Sometimes doing a small reprint is like out of the question because the unit costs come back and you just cannot make it work from a profitability standpoint. So we have to be thinking about that. And sometimes that means the initial print run, we might actually print less so that later when we have a better idea of how many we're going to need, we can then do a bigger reprint to make that unit cost work, if that makes sense. We're also looking at stuff like run-on costs. So we'll have quotes for a couple of different quantities. And if we see that printing, 2,000 copies versus 1,000 copies brings the price down by 30%, then we might actually print a little bit more than we need, because that extra risk that we're taking on, if the book does take off and needs those copies, it's worth it. And if it doesn't, the price wasn't so terrible that we can absorb that risk. So if it's a debut, it's all trickier because we don't have that data to go off of. I would start probably by looking at places like BookNet and BookScan, which are industry tools that exist. You have a membership to them and you can put in comparable titles. So if I think that my book is going to perform like some other book in the market, I can look at how much that book sold, but always keeping in mind that the numbers on there are not a full picture of the market. They don't include things like library sales or special sales. So it would be a place to start. Then I would talk with my sales reps. I would say, hey, what is Indigo thinking for this book? How many do you think they would come in at? I would gather all that information and then kind of make an educated guess. It's really an art. It's not a science. You gather all your intel, you think about your planned promotion, you think about your author's expectations, what the acquiring editor's expectations are, what markets are going to be strong, and what their projections are, and then you make a guess. Jack David at ECW, he's the founder here, and whenever we're picking numbers, he likes to just do this as though he's pulling the number from the sky. I do think there's a little bit more science to it than that, but after we pick the number, it's all just about monitoring it. So I am looking at stock every day. I'm looking, okay, did I make the wrong call with the number in that, do we need to reprint, or did I make the wrong call with where I sent it? Maybe I sent too much to Canada and I need to move some of it to the US, or I need to move some back. So it's all just like monitoring it. Most of the time, you probably are going to get it wrong. And it's just, making decisions to then mitigate that so that we get a reprint landing before we actually run out of stock. Okay. It's a big puzzle. It's a fun, big puzzle.
No, but that's a great way to explain it. Thank you. The second question that we have is more about rights. Sorry.
Sure.
It says, what makes a book more attractive to a foreign publisher? And this is to buy the rights of the book.
Yeah, to buy translation rights or territory rights. Yeah. I mean, every country is going to have its own taste and trends. So there's going to be things that will make it more attractive to some markets and not to others. But I think there's a few things that are generally great to have. One is an author having a big platform or visibility. So they're an expert in their field. They have a large media presence or a large social media following. That's going to give confidence to an international publisher. Reviews and award attention also going to signal that this book is quality, that it's interesting, that other people liked it. Timing really matters. If a topic happens to kind of start trending and you have a book about that, and there isn't a book in that market, that domestic market, that already is covering it, foreign publishers will then maybe see your book as an opportunity. We actually sold a book really recently because of that. We have a book about misinformation and critical thinking, and we sold it to a Japanese publisher because there just wasn't one in the market. Yeah, so genre matters too. I think nonfiction's a lot easier to sell to foreign publishers. It just translates better. Fiction, you usually need really strong reviews. You need award attention. It needs to be a genre that's really kind of bumping, horror right now. Or, at Frankfurt, I heard that at Frankfurt Book Fair last year, I heard that after a couple of years of kind of literary thrillers, no one wanted them. They're kind of coming back. So it's everything is cyclical. What's popular right now? And then the big one, and this is so frustrating because the biggest thing to help getting a translation deal is having a translation deal. So other publishers want to know if you've sold the book in other territories, which is hard when you haven't sold the book in other territories yet. You need that first one, but certain markets care about other markets. So the Italians always want to know if there's a German translation. The Scandinavians are interested if there's a Dutch translation. In France, they don't care. They have their own taste. They're like, whatever. It's knowing kind of what's going to move the needle for who. And then the big one, which I kind of talked about earlier about relationships and relationship management being really important, is so much of rights and making a book appealing to a publisher is remembering what they like. And that is having a relationship. So a couple of years ago, I met this Scottish publisher. It was a B2B meeting that had been organized through a Canadian granting body. And at the time, we didn't have anything that would work for him. But we chit-chatted, we talked, and he told me that he loves Leonard Cohen. He's like a huge Leonard Cohen fan. And I wrote it down. And a couple of years later, like maybe like 5-6 years later, we acquired a Leonard Cohen book. And I just remembered like, oh yeah, I remember that guy really loves Leonard Cohen. I'll send it to him. And he ended up acquiring the UK rights to that book. So that's a relationship, right? It's just knowing what someone likes and what they're looking for. And then you may not have it right now, but in 6 years from now, you might have it. And I should mention that a lot of that work happens through our sub-agents. We at ECW, and I think a lot of indie publishers are the same, work with sub-agents in every territory, except for Quebec and audio and English language. So we have agents in, say, France or in Poland or in Germany, and they are the ones that are actively pitching publishers, and I'm actively pitching the agent. So they're doing all of that kind of relationship building and knowing what those publishers are interested in and looking for. And so my job is to make sure that my agents know what we have and what might be interesting for their market, not just like throwing everything at them, but trying to kind of cull the list a little bit and make sure that I'm not overburdening them. Most sub-agents are fantastic. Everyone I work is fantastic. And so as long as I give them like clear material, they take it, they pitch it to their clients, and they're selling stuff for us. So it's really this mix of like visibility, credibility, timing, and relationships that kind of come together to make a perfect deal.
Okay, great. And I think this is a great transition to my next question, because actually the next question that I have here, it's how important is it to build a network when you're working in sales and rights?
Yes.
So yeah, I know that you already kind of explained it, but if you could go more in depth into it.
Yeah, it's truly, I think, the most important part of sales and rights,
Okay.
of both things. It's where they have a lot of overlap. My relationships with my sales reps, both at the Canadian Mana Group, but also we work with Simon and Schuster in the U.S. We have a
Okay.
different set of sales reps in the UK, a different set of sales reps in Australia, in India. So all these places,
Okay.
having the relationships with them and understanding that they know the market that they're working
Mm-hmm.
with better than I ever will. And my job is to make sure that they have what they need and that they trust me enough to ask for when they need something that I'm not providing. And that type of kind of like back and forth relationship is really important. Listening to them when they come to us and say, this cover is wrong. So important, because they know the places that they're selling to and they know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And so, really taking that seriously and building that trust is super important. And it's the same with our sub agents. The books are often already out when we're working with them. So it's not so much about feedback about the book itself, but it's feedback about how to deliver the information to them, and making sure that they feel like I'm somebody that they can come to and ask for things that they need. Um, is really important. And that's all just like making and fostering relationships and understanding that we're all working together for the same goal. It's not a competition. You know, I'm trying to sell our books just as much as they're trying to sell our books.
Yes, yes. Okay, and the last question that we have for the Q&A is, what's one thing that you wish authors understood about how books sell?
Okay, so this is going to be similar to my answer about misconceptions
Right,
about
yes.
sales, but so this applies to both authors and
Hmm.
everyone,
Everyone
even
else.
people in publishing sometimes.
Hmm.
I wish that people understood a book does not just sell itself. It's not
Yes.
magic. That having a book available where readers are looking for it and helping them discover it takes work. And that work may be invisible, but it is happening behind the scenes. So, you know, things like making sure it's on the right shelf in the bookstore, that it's in the right category on Amazon, that the stock is available in our warehouse so that places are showing it as in stock. Um, that's all happening behind the scenes. And that is why a book can actually get into the hands of a reader. That stuff doesn't happen by magic. It takes a lot of people working together behind the scenes. Um, and it's honestly like just as important as the editorial work that goes into the book or the cover or you know the jacket copy, because all those things can exist, but if the book is not available on Indigo for someone to click buy, no one's buying the book. So I think that's probably the biggest thing for me. And then the just to kind of harp on what I said before, that you know we don't have to measure success by whether or not it sold 1 million copies, or whether or not it hit the New York Times bestseller list. That selling your book to the right audience is success, and that can mean that we sold a translation deal, or we sold audiobook rights, or that the ebook has really blown up, or that a librarian chose it as kind of like a staff pick, or a bookseller chose it as a staff pick. You got great reviews from people on Goodreads. Like all of these things are measures of success. And there are very few books in the world that are going to sell in the quantities that a James Patterson or Sarah J. Maas is going to sell. And that doesn't mean that there's not a place for your book in this world, and that and your book is important. So that's my kind of like my lasting message for authors is success is it can look different ways.
Perfect. No, I think that's great. And exactly what you're saying is what I've seen. I think people do need to understand that, like, putting a book into a bookstore, it takes work, and sometimes it's invisible work that we do not appreciate. So also, when authors are like thinking about their sales, like also thinking about like, it doesn't matter if you make the New York Times bestseller. This will be great if you do, but that doesn't mean that your book is not important, as you're saying. I think that's
Absolutely.
that's so great. Well, we have gotten to like the end of the podcast, and I'm so sad because this conversation has been so incredible. Thank you, Emily, for like sharing with us like knowledge about sales, about rights. I know, especially when it comes to these departments, these are departments that are not really focused on when people talk about publishing. So it's great that you shared that knowledge with us. Thank you so much. And before I let you go, I wanted to ask, where can people follow ECW, learn more about the lists that you publish, and everything else?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I always love to talk about sales and rights and let people know that this is a job, that you don't
Yes.
have to be an editor to work in publishing, that
Yeah.
there are other things if you love books. Yeah, you can follow ECW on all the places. We're on Instagram. You know, I think Instagram is probably the most
Hmm.
active place.
Yeah.
Our website, ecwpress.com. We have all of our books up there. We've got like our most current season is kind of like
Okay.
highlighted at the
Hmm.
top. And if you ever have any questions about sales and rights and you want to talk to someone, you're always welcome to reach out to me. I'm at Emily at ecwpress.com. It's very easy to remember. Yeah, and ECW has some great books coming out in the next couple of months, so keep an eye out for what we've got coming.
That's so great. And now, one last question that I always ask my guests is that since this podcast is for people that are starting out in the industry, or maybe they're changing careers and want to kind of try out publishing, sometimes when you start into publishing, it's very hard. Like you get
Yes.
many rejections, or you're trying to find your way, and you might be feeling a little bit down, feeling like this is not the industry for you. For those people who do love the industry but are just feeling down right now, do you have some words of encouragement for them right now?
I do.
Go.
And it might be surprising, but I'm
Mhm.
going to say if you're looking for a job in publishing in a certain
Mhm.
area and you're not finding it, think about taking any job in
Yeah.
publishing. Much like my experience where I took a job in an area where I thought this is a nightmare, it ended up being a great choice. And honestly, even if it wasn't, it will give you some knowledge into how things work. So maybe switch it up a little bit, try applying for different types of jobs, and know that like everyone in Canadian publishing is really open to talking. So, I've had lots of coffee dates or Zoom dates with people who are looking to get into publishing. I'm more than happy to talk to people who reach out, and I think a lot of people are the same. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask. And that might give you a little bit of encouragement or a little bit of help for how to kind of guide your search. Because it's a small industry and a lot of people know a lot of people. So if you talk to someone, they might not have anything for you at the time, but they might know someone who does.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I know that that's gonna be like a great reminder for the audience to like you wanna kind of like keep trying in this industry, and you're gonna get your shot. Like it's just like a matter of keep trying, and you'll find your people, you'll find a place that where you belong and where you'll be able to work and like just contribute to the industry, which I know is a dream for many people. So again, thank you so much, Emily, for being with us. And yeah, thank you for everything that you share with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And that's it for today's episode. Next episode, we're going to have more amazing guests lined up for you for this season that you do not want to miss. So don't forget to follow and subscribe so you do not miss those episodes. You can also visit publishingguide.com for free resources and information about the season guests. Follow us on Instagram at the Publishing Guide for updates and behind the scenes content. Remember to leave in the comments any questions that you want to see in any future Q&As for the season. And please note that any views expressed in this podcast are personal and do not reflect the opinions of the host or guest employers. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.